This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. Very strange happened to me today. I was in the toilet. No, I was comparing two takes that I did. So if you don't know, I'm Cordy. I improvise pretty much every single intro you see me playing. There's like not planning that goes into this stuff. I've made it sort of a thing that I like to work on my improvising. That's partly why every day there's a new video or 7, and I'm not trying to. Well, I'm sort of just trying to force my way into like guitar world by playing guitar. For me, improvising on guitar is the thing that I like to practice. Now, what was really strange is that I'm just going to play you 2 completely separate takes with no intent at all. So what happens is essentially I set the camera recording, I sit down here, and I know where I want to come in for a solo, and for this particular thing I was thinking, well, I'd like quite a stream of 16th notes leading into the 1, and this is what happened. So I'm just going to play that for you again. As I say, let me just really clearly reiterate, I had no planning for this lick at all. I had no planned intent other than I was playing a line that leads into the 1. What I hope you may have noticed is that there's a huge amount of this lick which kind of overlaps in a way that if I actually intended to do this, I don't think I could do it without actually sitting down and learning this lick. And this made me question a few things, like about what is improvising, what is writing a solo, what is practice. It also made me think, what is free will? Do we even have it? But I thought it might be an opportunity to talk about how I've worked on my legato over the years, and how it is that then, therefore, that ends up in a line like that happening twice, essentially, a very similar line. So what you saw happening was that, so on the 1 and is where I started the line, and both times I started with this string skip down from the 5th fret down to the 8th fret. And I don't know what I did after that. I have notated it for both cases in case you wanted to look into it. But as I say, this would take me probably 15-20 minutes to sit down, play it, sort of memorize it, and figure out, what it feels like under my fingers to get this sort of thing. So it starts down here on the one and, so 1 and 2 and 3, 1, like that, and it ends on this fret here, on the 15th fret on a G, and what happens in between is like a continuous stream of 16th notes in legato. And this is the thing that I think essentially you should maybe take from this video, is that what you practice is what will come out in your lines eventually when you do get some sort of legato fluency. So the way that I think I practice this, and this is something I've been talking to David Beebe about, and hopefully I might be able to get a chance to put in some of his thoughts here, but the way that he described it was the rider is not in control of the elephant, but what we practice is being in control, so that by the time that we can start to put these things together, hopefully they fit together in a way that is interesting. So what I can tell you as I played this line, weirdly enough, there was really nothing going through my head. I was just seeing essentially the rails of B flat major is how I think about this. It's a progression in B flat major. So when I see B flat major, it's 3 note per string stuff all over the neck. I've worked on that. And that is a thing that I would suggest, that if you want to get good at legato and get fluent with it at all, then it should be really easy for you to see what are essentially the available notes. And like I said, Guthrie Govan talks about the guitar being like a typewriter, and with that I would say that when you think about scales, you're thinking about what is your available kind of things to write your story. You don't necessarily want to be thinking of every single option at once, and that's why these 3 note per string kind of shapes are useful for this kind of thing, because you're able to see these groups in a way that you're not thinking about every single note that passes by. So practice that sort of thing first, right? And so you know that there are 7 shapes per major scale, or major scale family. You could think about them as modes, whatever you want to think about them as. So you need to get familiar with that. And then, like Guthrie said, one of his things that he talked about doing was associating each string with a slide to the next available note. And then from there you can start to slide into your next available pattern, or your next available box, if that makes sense. So something I would do as a kid. This kind of thing, and practice descending as well. And that kind of thing. So that's kind of your first stage of legato, and this is probably the phase where you're figuring out how it is that you get notes to sound without picking every single note. And you might hopefully happen across a Tom Quayle video or something like that, which emphasizes to you the importance of keeping your right hand touch light. So once you have a grasp of this kind of seeing the rails quite clearly, what you can practice doing, and this is something I've seen Tom talk about, is like developing legato pathways, is how he describes it, I believe. And this is the sort of thing where this comes from. Like these little building blocks, and you could look throughout the lick, each, as I played it, there are lots of little legato corners, ways around, so you're not just going. It's actually. You know, it's going around corners and you're trying to keep it from being super repetitive. So these are things that you can develop at a slower pace. And don't stop the line. I think so. People ask me, how do you get longer legato lines? You need to practice being comfortable with on the fly, kind of figuring out how you're going to keep the line going, if that makes sense. So you could certainly, you know, learn licks from other folks that are doing these longer lines. But also, I think a big part of this development is to just start trying to keep that stream of consciousness, the stream of notes going, and you do that. At slower speeds, and you hope that some of this stuff will translate. One other really important thing that I think there is to practice is this idea of permutations. You see Alan Holdsworth talk about this stuff as well. But the idea, if you take sort of a pair of strings and you think about, right, I'm going to play a certain amount of notes on one and a certain on the other. And one of my kind of go-to patterns that I've found I do a lot of is this. So you do 3 on your first string, and then on your second string you jump up, back down to 1, then into that middle note and back up to the top one. So if you thought about that as a permutation, you'd have and you think about each 3 note per string as being 1, 2, 3. So it could be your first note of that string, the second note of that, or the third note. So then I go 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's something that I do an awful lot of. It works kind of in triplet feel as well as 16th note feel. When you're first getting to grips with this idea of continuous legato playing, I'd encourage you to avoid triplet feel to start with and start off with this 16th note feel, because this will help to even out your right hand picking as well, because if you're going, you're not going to get as even a sound as. And being in control of that is a really important thing. So those are kind of my tips for this. Pick certain people's licks that you think, right, that is the thing that I want to be doing. But I also think as well, get the idea of just doing this slower. And if you put on like a record that you like the sound of, just see what you can do. So if you maybe play along with the hi-hat and try and. And then I switch to like triplet feel. You just go with what you can actually achieve with the track, with the idea that you're trying to keep this stream consciousness going. And maybe if you find you're doing things that are super repetitive, like I've just noticed in a lick that I was not intending to be in any way similar, you think about trying to develop new permutations and new parts that you're playing so that you can have more elephants that you're not in control of, and so that you're less likely to be as repetitive. I think is a good goal to have. So you could maybe think, right, in the case that I knew 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3 works, what about if I tried this sort of descending idea, 3, 2, 1, then 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. And you could maybe work that into your playing as well, and you think, right, I want to continue that idea. Ah. And try and work that kind of concept into your slower kind of stream of consciousness legato explorations. Since it's 3 note per string stuff, you don't have to limit this to major scale stuff either as well. Like I say, if you learn the rails of the melodic minor, you can maybe get better at that as well. So that's my approach, and what I've noticed from that rather surprising kind of discovery. That's how I developed some of my legato technique and stuff. As I say, when you're doing this, this is the fundamental kind of stuff where you're not just learning to hammer on and pull off. But you're also learning the rails that are available, learning the layout of that typewriter, learning the scales and visualizing them. And I think that's a really important part of this legato playing, because you have to have a really good, strong way of being able to kind of see this stuff if you want to be able to execute it and kind of generally play the right notes. That's my thoughts on it and how I would practice it. I'll put up the tab for this on Patreon and the backing track if you want to try it. But that's my thoughts on these longer legato lines, such as they are. There are other ways that you could do this stuff, of course. This isn't the only way. This is just how I approach it and how I got to wherever I am at with it.